What's going on, everybody? It's Afro Think Tank. Today I want to touch on a topic that absolutely never gets talked about, but is always somewhat brought up in conversation when talking about the relationship between Africa and various other places in the world. Now, currently, right now, the worldwide relationships are shifting, and Africa is currently going into diplomatic and business relationships with Asia, right? Shifting away from the West and going towards Asia to find better opportunities and be able to leverage their resources and their economies with other countries that also, need to leverage their resources and their economy. And one complaint I get from, I would say, Africans, right, in general, and this complaint is usually coming from a victim mindset, whether they believe that we're victims or not. It comes from a victim mindset. Is whenever they see interactions between African countries and China, or African countries and other European countries, right, that had nothing to do with the transatlantic slave trade, the sentiment that I hear a lot is, oh, Africans will never learn, they're letting other people colonize them, they're letting people take advantage of them, because they're automatically assuming that anytime Africa does any type of business or interaction with another foreign country, that business is being done from a victim platform, that these African countries and these politicians are perpetual victims, and that they can only be victimized by every other country, because to these people's mind who believe this and say this, they already inherently believe that the African countries are inferior when it comes to business or politics, and that they're going to get automatically taken advantage of. That's a victim mentality, right? And because the West does not want Africa to diversify its business and social practices with the rest of the world, they are on a campaign to make African people see Asian people as the enemy, equal to how we feel about the European, right? The West has the actual the cojones, right? The steel balls, right? They got the nerve, right? After 500 years of obvious barbaric, savage, thievery, death, and murder and genocide towards the African people and towards the Asians for their own benefit in the West, and we see the results of their thievery, right? They have the nerve to try to warn us about Asians and having relations with Asians, right? As far as business is concerned. Now, China has never colonized Africa. China, besides its territories that's disputed, has never bombed, killed, murdered anybody else in any type of global expansionist way. China does not fund dictators, and they probably do somewhere, but they don't fund dictators with express purposes to change the political dynamics on the ground in order to gain favor. They don't do that. Chinese people do business, right? And we have a lot of unknowledgeable and unaware African people who think that any business that we do with China is a servant master business, because we're so used to the way the West does business, right? We think that everybody else is going to do business the same way, but that's not the case. Now, do other countries have motives to why they want to do business in Africa? Obviously, Africa is the place of resources. Africa is the place of people and power, right? Africa has a wealth of resources that the world needs, not just wants, but needs. Therefore, they must do business internationally. Africa needs certain things, right? Africa needs certain intellectual know-hows in order to run certain industries within their countries. Because for the longest time, the Western powers, who's been in Africa for how long now, right? For all the technologies and all the things that we have created, we have propped up all of our materials, and all of the resources within the ground has propped up all of these technologies that we enjoy today. All of our Africans who've been dispersed throughout the West, who've intellectual knowledge, right? Whether the transatlantic slave trade or the immigration afterwards, all the Africans' contribution to society all of that has been exported out of Africa into the West. And what has the West done? Absolutely nothing but make sure that Africa stays in a subservient position, utilizing sanctions, utilizing the US dollar and the International Monetary Fund to make sure that governments in Africa, right, cannot empower themselves with their own resources, with their own intellectual capacities to improve their countries. Because if Africa improves their countries and start using the resources that they have, along with the intellectual knowledge they've been gaining from their diasporas being all over the West, they have no need for the West. And the West cannot have an Africa that does not need it. The West cannot have a South and Central America that does not need it. The West cannot have a Europe that does not need it. America controls Europe and the rest of the world via the American dollar and its sanctions. That's why BRICS is so important, right? Because it allows countries to be able to operate financial sectors without worrying about, can America just pull the plug from underneath them? You understand? They're able to operate freely. That's what makes BRICS so important, right? Capitalism, right? The machine, the form of capitalism America uses is the machine that's used to oppress the world. These are facts. This form of capitalism, which is corporate authoritarianism, right? Which basically makes multiples of kings who never get held accountable for the things that they do, ever, right? And when we have wars, those are results of corporations fighting for resources and territories, right? They get us to do it via the state, state fighting and the federal government and all that stuff, right? So we sit back and we see Africans currently making lots of moves to detach themselves from the barbaric Western European form, mostly the Francophone European form of colonialism, economic colonialism, right? By going and doing business with other countries that also have their own experiences with that same barbaric colonialism group of people, right? The Chinese and the Indians and the Turks all have experiences with the modern day form of Western colonialism. And all of these countries and regions around the world had their own issues they had to deal with based off white Western European colonialism wrapped in capitalism that has destroyed the world and put most people around the world in a stressful life situation. People don't enjoy their lives. Everybody has become a slave to capitalism, right? And America demonizes any other form of government that goes against capitalism, because if capitalism were to ever change, that means the authoritarian oligarchs who run the world start all the wars and capitalize and monopolize all the companies, forcing you to buy their products, forcing you to live in their homes, forcing you to buy their loans, forcing you to be an economic slave via your social security number, your birth certificate, and all these other documents that say that they own you. And if you don't give them money, then you're basically illegal. You can't even be alive. Like, you have to pay taxes to be alive in the Western world. You're not free, right? So other places that have a different idea of how humankind can be governed and move forward, whether good or bad, right? They have different ideas and they want the ability to be able to flex their economies and improve their economies for their people, without having America continuously squashing them. The reason why Haiti is the way it is direct result of American sanctions. The reason why Venezuela is the way it is directly caused by American sanctions. Anytime a government tries to go a socialist route, the government of America will sanction that country, and then they will tell the world, hey, look what happens with socialism. Socialism doesn't work because look at those countries that are socialist, right? We're not knowing that the capitalistic system has the tools to destroy and destabilize socialist countries by propping up dictators, propping up corrupt politicians, and putting sanctions so that country cannot use its own natural resources and put it on the international market to do business, to take that socialist programs to improve other societies. But America itself is a capitalistic / socialist society, and the most popular programs in America, Medicaid and Social Security, are socialist programs, which Americans who are brainwashed to believe that capitalism came out the Bible enjoy the most. And if you were ever to take away those socialist programs, those Americans who love capitalism so much would have a heart attack and they will protest. And whoever dared to take away these socialist programs would definitely lose the election, whether Democrat or Republican. You understand? So socialism is something that America benefits from because it gives us a safety net against the authoritarian capitalistic system that does not care about you. Capitalism is the reason why we have illegal immigration, is because no longer is the white man willing to pick fruit and scrub toilets. They taught their children to strive for more. No longer does the African American want to scrub toilets and pick fruit because their parents told them to strive for more. So as we seek higher and more jobs that are deemed more respectable in the society, the other jobs that are necessary for the world to operate are becoming hard to fill. So what happens? You bring in immigration, you bring in people who are willing to do those jobs. At this moment, it's Latinos, and in Canada, it's Caribbeans and Africans. They're willing to do the jobs that the established population are not going to do, right? And at some point, that established those new people that come in and do their job, their children will be coerced to do other things, to thrive and to move up the social economic ladder. And then they won't have those same Latinos that want to, or those same African immigrants that want to scrub toilets and clean houses and things like that. Now the new illegal immigrant that's on its way is going to be the robots. Once the robots take place, because capitalism says it's cheaper to have a robot do it than to have a human being do it, because there's no liability. I don't have to worry about papers. I don't have to worry about lunch breaks. I don't have to worry about labor laws. I can get this robot to be my permanent slave, 24 hours to work for me. All I gotta do is oil that thing up and charge it up. That's on its way. And once we get to that point, nobody's gonna really have jobs, and we're gonna have to change to some form of socialist system anyway, because capitalism won't work anymore, because the corporations have no need to hire us because they're in the business of making money. And right now, robots and artificial intelligence is how they make money, how money is going to be made in the future. Whether you're prepared for it or not, that's coming, right? But what we need to understand is Africa has always had international relations with Asia. African countries right now that they are learning over decades of making mistakes, decades of trying to figure out what it is that this white Western capitalist system, how it's supposed to work. And just like every other capitalistic government, you have corrupt politicians that steal from their people. Every single government on this planet is corrupt because people are corruptible when given power, period. Even though they like to emphasize Africa and its corruption. But Ukraine is 1,000 times more corrupt than any African country in Africa. Any African country in Africa. And if you knew that, you would see that the corruption and America's interference within Ukraine is the reason why hundreds of thousands of white Europeans are dying in Europe right now, killing each other so that corporations can make more money for their own families, their own tribe, right? Same thing, different scale. So when we're talking about Africans doing business with China, or China wanting to do certain things in Africa, and we always get in this depressive mindset, oh, Africans never learn. You're coming from a place of you don't have enough knowledge to formulate your opinion and to make it, you don't have enough knowledge to formulate that opinion, right? You need to gather more information to understand. A lot of these African countries are doing regular business that regular countries do. America, right? We do business with China. The same business that we do with business with China, Africa's doing business with China. China owns a lot of properties and a lot of businesses in America, but we don't complain about that like we complain about Chinese doing business in Africa. Turkey does a lot of business in America. Every country around the world has property, owns companies in America, and operates utilizing the American dollar. And comes and get the resources that America has to take it back to their country. Every country does that. So Africa being a continent with multiple countries, a lot of these countries are going to want to trade resources, which the point of the resources is to use them to leverage to improve your country. They're going to use the resources to coerce other countries to come and give them their intellectual knowledge about, maybe refineries, manufacturing, business sector, banking, all sorts of resources that other countries have are going to flow into Africa, and in turn we're going to have a transactional relationship where you give me that and I give you this. So anytime you hear China wanting to do, like for instance, I made a video, China, they have a population problem and they're going to use Africans as a solution. Now, a lot of people will say that's Chinese people taking advantage of Africans, but not necessarily. If these Africans want to go to China and live in China, if China wants to have 100 million Africans, guess what? I don't got a problem with that. Why? Because at the end of the day, that spreads African people out around the world, right? And yes, they're gonna mix. People are gonna mix. So people really should get over that. And here's the thing, if you're African and you black and you're looking at the bigger picture, everybody belongs to us, right? So no matter how much mixing we do, over time, everything goes back to black. Everything goes back. You know what happens with 100 million Africans in China? What that's gonna do? That'll change the demographics of China. Now, you say, oh, well, Chinese people treat, Africans like shit. Well, yeah, those things will change as the relationships become normalized, as they start to learn, more about Africans, and they start to see Africans on a daily basis. And things will change. That's just how things work. Attitudes will change. The racism that happens in Asia is different from the European racism. European racism is envy, jealousy, and a weird mental obsession, right? The racism that you see in Asian countries that have a homogenous countries where all the people are either one way or other is simply is a lack of knowledge, is ignorance of other cultures and other races. And usually over time, once they get to know those groups, then they know their racism goes away. It's different. It's not the same. It's just a lack of knowledge. Everybody's afraid of something they don't know about because it's different, right? And we have to accept the fact that Africans are big, strong, very outgoing people. So there's some societies that's not so big and strong and outgoing as us, and that could be a lot on societies that have a more, docile way of living, and no docile group personality, right? We're talking about clash of cultures, right? But we have to stop putting Africa underneath all these other countries when it comes to doing business, right? African people are now standing on their own side by side with these other countries and doing business in fair manners. Now, there's some countries that still allowing their people to be taken advantage of, right? Things have not been fixed. We have to give Africa time to develop, these countries to develop into their maturity. The West, with the thievery of African culture and money and people and intellectual know-how, it took them over 200, 300 years to get to this point. And many civil wars, many European wars to get to this point with the advantages. Africa's only had close to 60 years of liberation. It takes a little longer for a country to get themselves together when the politicians are older than the democracies that they're supposed to run. It takes time for the new blood, the new politicians to come out, like we see happening in West Africa, where the new politicians and the younger, more aware, more advanced Africans when it comes to international relations and business and banking and financing and government, when these people come on deck and start to take charge of these countries, things are inherently and naturally going to change. And that's what's happening now. That's what we're witnessing now. Europeans want to stop that, but they can't stop that. The African rise is inevitable. So we need to start putting a little bit more respect on Africa's name when it comes to doing business. We can do business with Russia. We can do business with Europe. We can do business with Asia. We can trade and do different things, because that's how the world is going to go. People will be moving to Africa. Africa is not going to be a homogenous, a black homogenous place, even though for the most part, it'll stay 99% black, no matter how many different groups of people move into Africa. Our population is so big that we can easily absorb everybody else, and over a few generations, all of that will disappear in the depths of our DNA. And everybody will look just like they already look in Africa. Because Africans have every single phenotypical look that every different group outside of Africa has. We have nothing to worry about genetically, racially, at all. We just need to do business in our countries that we reside in, needs to operate effectively to improve the lives of all those people that want to live there. And that's the way they're going. So from this point on, people need to not stop having that self-deprecating mindset that anytime Africa does business, whether they're selling resources for intellectual knowledge or other resources other countries have, that is some sort of subservient, slave-like deal that we need to always worry about. Yes, we need to do more business with each other within Africa, and that's already happening now. It's already happening now, but it doesn't mean we're not going to be on the world stage doing business and operating, having relationships with other countries. That's just the way the world works. And if you don't like it, I don't know what to tell you, but that's how it's going to work. So we need to start changing the narrative. We need to stop calling ourselves minorities. We're the majority. We need to put that in our head. We are the majority of the world. We're the global South, and we're now on the world stage doing international business on our own 2 feet, and we're not being dictated to by the West. And that's the new stance that we got to have. Anyway, that's all I got to say. This is Afro Think Tank. Learn something, teach something. I'm out.